The Call of the Wild, Chapter 4, Snow. The man who bought Buck and Curly was named Perrault. He was a French-Canadian and worked for the Canadian government. He and his partner, Francois, carried important messages by dog sled, and the speed of the delivery was their main concern. Perrault and Francois sailed from Seattle, Washington, aboard a ship called the Narwhal. Buck stood on the deck with Curly and took his last look at the warm weather, although he did not know it at this time. Perrault took them below deck to meet the two other large dogs. One was Dave, a gloomy, sleepy dog who wanted only to be left to himself. The other greeted Buck and Curly with a superior air, though he smiled. He was a handsome fellow, snow-white, and almost as big as Buck. This was Spitz, a dog accustomed to leading and being admired by men and dogs alike. Curly was awed by Spitz, but neither Perrault nor Francois showed much friendliness to the dogs, even though he had admired and patted Buck earlier. Perrault now maintained a distance, however. He treated all the dogs alike, with fairness. The beautiful Spitz got no larger a dinner than the gloomy Dave. But Spitz was not used to being treated the same as lesser dogs, and he decided to assert himself. Smiling, he approached Buck at dinner. When Buck looked up, Spitz snatched his food. Buck sprang to punish him, but at the last moment, Perrault's whip lashed the air and encircled Spitz. With a howl, Spitz dropped Buck's bone. Buck halted his leap and picked up his bone and went back to enjoying his dinner. Spitz had been punished by the fair Perrault, and Buck felt that was enough. But he saw Spitz staring at him with anger barely concealed in his snapping black eyes. Though it was only a moment between the stealing of Buck's bone and Buck taking it back, Curly had started to bark in anxiety and excitement. Dave, however, looked up once and then resumed his own dinner, as if nothing had happened. Buck soon saw that nothing could disturb Dave. When the Narwhal started to pitch and roll in a storm, Buck and Curly, never having been on water before, were half wild with fear, but Dave only gave them an annoyed glance and went to sleep. This helped to shame Buck into calmness, though Curly continued to yelp and race around in fear. The Narwhal had plodded on farther and farther north. When the two men took the dogs for a run on the deck twice a day, Buck felt the change in the weather. It was an icy kind of cold that caused the dogs' fur coats to ruffle up, but that way, their fur held their body heat better. One morning, when Buck woke up, he immediately sensed that something was different. In a moment, he realized that the steady throb of the Narwhal's propeller was silent, and the ship was no longer making her way against the rough seas. She was in port. Perrault and Francois rushed around packing their belongings. Finally, Francois brought out the dogs' leashes, and they lined up eagerly. They were infected by the excitement of the men and the knowledge the Narwhal had stopped. Buck was the first to follow Francois up onto the deck, but his feet sank into something white and mushy, something like mud. He jumped back with a snort. Then he noticed that some more white stuff was falling through the air and landing on his coat. He shook it off, but more continued to fall. He sniffed at it curiously, then licked some up on his tongue. It bit like fire, but in the next instant it was gone. This puzzled him. He tried it again, but the same result. Francois and the deck hands laughed uproariously, pointing at Buck and at the white stuff they called snow. Then, more confident, Buck lifted his huge head and let the snow fall freely onto his face. It made him almost feel playful. Perrault and Francois led Buck and the other dogs down the gangplank of the Narwhal. The snow was falling steadily, but Buck padded along easily, not frightened, not cold. He had begun to master his new surroundings.